Ever feel like you're kind of playing the wrong game in life?
Hmm.
Like you're stuck chasing short-term wins when you should be aiming for something bigger.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today with Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game.
Oh, great book.
It's all about understanding, the difference between like finite games and infinite games and how recognizing which one you're actually in can totally change how you define success.
Yeah, what I find really interesting about Sinek's work is how it kind of challenges us to rethink our assumptions, right? Like, we're so used to thinking about success as this finite thing, something with a clear finish line, a winner, all of that.
Right, exactly.
But what if that's not the right way to look at it, at least for everything?
Yeah, it's like when you start thinking about things like building a company that really lasts, or even like living a truly meaningful life, right? There's no trophy ceremony at the end of that.
Exactly, exactly.
So how do we even begin to approach these infinite games?
Well, Sinek lays it out really clearly. He says finite games, think like a football game, a chess match. They've got those set players, fixed rules. There's a clear winner at the end.
Makes sense.
But infinite games, that's different. You might not even know you're in the game. The rules can change, and there's no real finish line.
Okay, I'm starting to see the difference.
Yeah.
But how does this actually play out in the real world? The example of Microsoft and Apple, the Zune versus the iPod, that really jumped out at me.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic example.
Yeah.
So you've got Microsoft, all those resources, right? And they just threw everything they had at trying to, beat Apple's iPod.
Like it was a battle to the death.
Exactly. They were so focused on winning that finite game of like market share that they completely missed the bigger picture.
And Sinek talks about that story, right? Asking an Apple executive about the Zune. And their response is just so telling. I have no doubt. It wasn't even arrogance. It was just this totally different way of looking at things.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like Apple wasn't even playing the same game. They were focused on their own vision, on making something incredible, not just, beating a single competitor. They were playing the infinite game. Like think about a company like Lego, right?
Okay.
They're not just selling bricks. They're inspiring like generations of creativity. Their goal is to be around for decades, always changing and adapting.
That long-term vision is so key.
Yeah.
And speaking of legacies, Sinek's example of George Eastman, the founder of Kodak, really stuck with me.
Oh, absolutely. Eastman wasn't just content with like building a successful company. He wanted to change the world, make
Yes.
photography something everyone could do. And he did. He changed how we capture and share memories.
And it wasn't just about the product either, right?
No, not at all. Eastman, he really invested in his employees, in the community. He was a pioneer in profit sharing, gave paid sick leave, even founded a music school and a hospital.
That's incredible. He understood that a company's success is about way more than just profits. It's about having a positive impact on the world.
Absolutely. Eastman embodies that infinite mindset. It's about building something that lasts, that makes a real difference, not just chasing short-term gains. But what happens when we bring that finite mindset into these infinite games? That's where things get really interesting and kind of dangerous.
So then how do we avoid falling into that trap? It seems so easy to get caught up in that finite game mindset without realizing it.
It is. It's really easy to forget about the bigger picture when you're caught up in the heat of the moment, right?
It's like you get so focused on winning the next battle that you lose sight of the entire war.
Exactly. And Sinek uses a really powerful example to illustrate this point, the Vietnam War.
Oh, right. Because on paper, it seemed like the U.S. was winning, right?
Exactly. The U.S. military, they were all about those tactical victories, racking up enemy casualties, all those measurable objectives.
But they were fighting a different kind of war than the North Vietnamese.
Exactly. For the North Vietnamese, it wasn't just a war, it was an existential fight for their survival, a true infinite game. They were willing to endure incredible losses, to adapt and change their strategies because losing simply wasn't an option.
And that makes the U.S. focus on things like body counts and territorial gains seem, well, kind of short-sighted.
Totally. And it shows how dangerous it can be to get fixated on those short-term metrics in an infinite game.
And Sinek says this happens all the time in the business world, too.
All the time. Companies chasing quarterly profits, obsessing over their competition.
Instead of focusing on a bigger vision.
Exactly. They're sacrificing those things that are crucial for long-term success. Trust, innovation, a shared purpose.
It's like that saying, winning the battle but losing the war. You might get that temporary victory, but at what cost?
And the consequences, they can be really serious. Look at what happened at Wells Fargo, a classic example Sinek talks about.
That whole scandal was a huge wake-up call for a lot of companies. And it wasn't just a case of a few bad apples, right?
Not at all. It was a systemic problem. Employees, they were pressured to hit these crazy sales targets, even if it meant bending the rules.
So they started cutting corners, thinking, well, everyone else is doing it.
And that's where that ethical fading comes in, right? It's not always about intentionally being bad, but it's this slow erosion of those ethical boundaries.
One little compromise leads to another before you know it.
You've strayed way too far from your values.
And the scary thing is, this doesn't just apply to big corporations, right?
Nope, it can happen to anyone. We can fall into this trap in our own lives, making those compromises, justifying our actions until we're like totally off course.
It's a pretty sobering thought, but it really highlights why we need to be mindful of the game we're playing. So how do we shift that mindset from finite to infinite? How do we escape that pressure to win in the short term and start making choices that lead to a more, I don't know, more fulfilling future? It feels like we need a real, like a fundamental shift in thinking to break free from that win-at-all-cost mentality.
Absolutely, it's not easy.
And Sinek talks about this idea of a just cause, right? And I have to admit that really resonated with me.
It's a powerful idea because a just cause, it's not just like a mission statement you put on a wall, right? It's got to be bigger than that.
So it's more about the impact you want to have on the world.
Exactly. It's a vision of a better future, something truly inspiring that gets people to, contribute because they believe in it, not just for their own gain.
So like, it's not about selling a product, it's about the reason behind it.
Exactly. Think about, have you heard of Nikolai Vavilov?
I don't think so.
He was a Russian botanist, and he dedicated his life to creating this seed bank, right, to protect the world's food supply. And during the siege of Leningrad, his team, they were trapped, starving, but they refused to eat the seeds they were protecting.
Wow, that's commitment.
They literally chose to starve to protect those seeds for the future, for something bigger than themselves.
That's an incredible story. But how do we bring that kind of passion, that sense of purpose, into it like a more everyday setting?
It's about leadership. Look at Alan Mulally when he took over Ford. They were on the brink, right? He could have focused on slashing costs, squeezing profits, all those short-term fixes, but he didn't. He brought everyone together around this idea of building great cars.
And that resonated more than just hitting numbers.
Absolutely. Mulally, he understood that trust was everything. He created this culture where people felt safe to take risks, to admit mistakes, to support each other.
Which is something Sinek talks about a lot, right? The importance of building trust. Like that example with the Shell oil rig.
The URSA rig, right. Yeah, they made these massive improvements in safety just by focusing on building trust within the team.
It's amazing how powerful that is.
Because when people feel safe, when they feel heard, they're more likely to speak up if something's wrong, they'll share ideas, they'll be more creative.
It creates this environment where everyone can thrive. So we got the just cause, the trust, and then Sinek throws in this other idea, worthy rivals.
It seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Shouldn't we want to, crush the competition? See, that's that finite game mindset creaking back in. Worthy rivals, they're not enemies. They're sparring partners that make you better.
I see. So you learn from each other.
Exactly. They push you to innovate, to up your game. Remember that story about Alan Mulally telling everyone at Ford that his favorite car was a Lexus?
Yeah. Bold move.
He knew that acknowledging a competitor's strengths, that wasn't weakness, that was smart. It pushed his team to learn and adapt.
So it's about looking beyond just winning every little battle.
Exactly. It's about seeing the bigger picture, embracing the long game, finding inspiration, even from unexpected places.
This has been a really, really insightful conversation. So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with this. Where in your own life, your work, are you maybe too focused on winning a finite game? How could shifting to that infinite mindset change things for you, help you achieve those bigger, more meaningful goals? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.